Please mute yourselves. Please mute yourselves. Please use the chat. Please mute yourselves. Kindly mute yourselves. Thank you. We take this opportunity to express solidarity with our troops, and our deepest condolences are with the families of the martyrs. We welcome you all to the fourth and final program in the IWFA Coronavirus COVID-19 webinar series, Sustainable Solutions for Persons with Disabilities. The pandemic lockdown and unlock proceedings are posing new threats to existing mental issues and acting as a catalyst to the formation of new mental health conditions. Taking cognizance of this growing malaise, Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, recently addressed that mental health is at the core of our humanity. It enables us to lead rich and fulfilling lives and to participate in our communities. But the COVID-19 virus is not only attacking our physical health, it is also increasing psychological suffering and grief at the loss of loved ones, shock at the loss of jobs, isolation and restrictions on movement, difficult family dynamics, uncertainty and fear for the future. So the focus of the final webinar of the series is mental health. Reiterating our webinar protocols to ensure a smooth, effortless, and well-defined transmission, please, in fact, we had a little proof of it when there was so much of audio going on. So please do disable your mics during the sessions to reduce background noise. Switch off your cameras to improve connectivity in areas of weak connectivity. At the end, we will all have you switch on your cameras so that we can wish you in person. And we can have a group picture. No clicking of pictures of the webinar is allowed. A recorded session will be available. Unregistered participants, please share name, email ID, and contact information, or register at the link provided so we can communicate further details of upcoming events. Fill in the feedback forms provided to help us plan and schedule programs which are of interest to you and which you would like to participate in. Send in questions in the chat box addressed to a specific panelist. Sustainable Solutions for Persons with Disabilities honors the achievements of the 17 IWFA Nina Sibal Memorial Award recipients. Through this series, we draw upon the experience of awardees. May I request all participants, please switch off your audio. Please put your audio on mute. Thank you so much. So this series is being held to honor the achievements of the 17 IWFA Nina Sibal Memorial Award recipients. Through this series, we draw upon the experience of these awardees to develop COVID-19 coping mechanisms among people, especially children with special needs, foster resilience of the disabled to face the challenge, provide examples of sustainable practices that can be replicated and scaled up. Tech team, has Mr. Tak arrived? Is Mr. Tak here? Tech team?
Yes, I am here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Welcome, yes. So the topic, as I said today, is mental health is the topic for today's webinar, and I will call upon our 13th Iwafa Nina Sibbal Memorial Awardee of 2015, Mr. Javed Ahmad Tak, founder, Humanity Welfare Organization, Helpline, Anantnag, Jammu and Kashmir. He has been awarded the Nina Sibbal Award in recognition of his organization's pioneering work in rehabilitating disabled children affected by the disturbed situation in that area. Also awarded the Padma Shri earlier this year, his work has won accolades from, among others, Mr. Narendra Damodar Das Modi, Prime Minister of India, in his Mann Ki Baat. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I give you Mr. Javed Ahmad Tak.
Thank you so much. I really thank you for organizing this webinar. It is the need of the hour, and all the people who put their efforts in this organizing the webinar, all are worth appreciation. And I thank all other my panelists who are with me today, and the participants who took their time to join this webinar. I hope we will find it very worth, because everyone has given their time for this. Basically, mental health is needed by everyone. All the humans need the well-being of their own, and on the top priority, mental health needs to be maintained during all types of situations. As this is the COVID-19 situation, we had all of us had seen a lockdown for a big period. Some maybe in 60 days, some are still in the lockdown, and maintaining the mental health is a big challenge for all of us, because even a small thing can change our mental hygiene. Even a small thing can change our mental setup within seconds. Sometimes we smell some bad smell, and our uh, we feel mentally disturbed. Sometimes we feel somebody has talked some bad word, we feel mentally disturbed. So mental health is an important topic on which we are going to have a kind of discussion and talk today. And for person with disabilities, it is important to have a good mental setup during all the situations. Why person with disabilities are facing some mental disturbances? Because when, as we are living a dependent life, and when we feel that a small kind of thing is not with us, we feel mentally disturbed, and we are helpless to get sometimes medicine, sometimes our to get our high support needs which we need for maintaining our lives. As far as the children with disabilities are concerned, in these situations we feel that children with disabilities are not connected to their institutions, to the school, to the therapy centers where their well-being was ensured. As these children have already a lot of difficulties, and we can talk about the children having ADHD or attention deficit. It is not easy for them to get connected through virtual classes or virtual type of technologies. We cannot think of uh, that a child having the psychiatric needs or the psychiatric problems can be done with without the consultation of a psychiatrist or a concerned professional whom he needs in the time of that time. So there needs to be a proper planning. Even I am suggesting that after COVID, we should have a collective step towards formulating a forum where we can think of emergency situations, pandemics, disasters, during which children with disabilities are given or consoled, who need these psychiatric medicines, who need continuous therapies, who need even outing and they are not being allowed to go out because of the risk. This also needs to be, this is also a big question mark for all of us, and how we can do it. And the sustainable solution here is that there should be some proper mechanism either at the community level or at the family level where the parents need to be involved. One of the parent at least needs to be involved, trained, so that he can uh, adjust the child during the pandemics, during the risky situation, all types of it. Because uh, you know, in Jammu and Kashmir, the life was totally at halt from August 5, and it is about complete 1 year that these children have not gone to school. Even general non-disabled children have not gone to school because first it was the lockdown from the government after dissolving the 370 article. Then it was the harsh winter and it was winter vacation in Jammu and Kashmir. And from March, when school started, only after 3 days, the schools were again locked down uh, being this COVID situation, so that children are not affected by it. So from 11 months, the children of Jammu and Kashmir are inside the homes. They are not having any formal education, and the virtual classrooming start only after COVID lockdown, teleclassing. But again, when we talk of the children with disabilities, they are not catered through the teleclassing or the virtual classroom. One, I talked that attention deficit is there. Second is that the children with communication problems like deaf and mute, those who have severe speech and hearing disabilities, they too are not catered through this teleclassing because we don't have a good number of professionals or the sign language interpreters available with us. The There is a big need that the institution for the sign language has been created just 2 3 years back. It is branches need to be opened in different states so that professionals are created, so that the communication barrier between the teacher and the student facing these speech and hearing disabilities should also be covered in all types of situations when classrooms are in virtual form or in different ways. And as per as the children without schooling, they also have the kind of mental stress. The counseling is one of the important factor that needs to be adjusted in, so that when the odd times come in, the children with disabilities are counseled that why they are out of schools, because our children with hearing and speech disabilities, they more or less do not know why the situation has occurred, why they are out of schools. They only say that some virus is there, some disease is there, uh, but the actual portion they don't know, and what uh, factors they should go with, what are the basic guidelines for them, they don't know because the communication barrier had put them at the peripheries. They are at the peripheries, and after a long gap, when they remain out of the schools, their mental psyche is little bit disturbed because they feel that something has happened and we don't know. So there should be the counseling should be the part of schooling now, because school management we don't prefer to have counselors with us. The schools or the institutions where children with disabilities are connected either for the developmental therapies, either for the physiotherapies, occupational therapies. Counseling should be part there so that the mental stress uh, can't grab these children and lap them uh, for so many time they uh, can't describe themselves, they can't say about their situations. Somebody should be there to console them also. As far as the person with severe disabilities who are bedridden, who have high support needs, they too face a lot of stress. I can talk one situation where a person with severe disability was in a very much trauma because his caregiver had gone to home and lockdown was announced. For 2 months, he couldn't get his caregiver back, and even he couldn't say anybody. He was not knowing where is the helpline, where I can talk like this situation that my caregiver is not with me, and he developed a severe septic pressure sores, and he was mentally completely disturbed. And when we came to know about the situation, we approached to the divisional commissioner, and sent they told to send a written application what is the basic problem. And when caregiver came back, it was seen that his pressure sores were so septic that it will take around 6 months him to heal again. And he was completely mentally stressful because her wife was not in a position to carry him and to take him on the wheelchair or to take him to the washroom because she couldn't lift him because of his overweight. And there was the another member in the family was 3 years old daughter who couldn't do anything. So living in only one posture for a huge time, it was a stressful condition. So, for a person with disability, there are the situations where mental psyche is totally unbalanced, where the person cannot express him and he feels he is grabbed in the stressful situations. So, uh, when we are running lot of organizations, every organization should have a database. Our government should also create a database. um, Along with there should be a column of special needs for a person who need it, and there should be one helpline, one clear helpline that should be exclusive for the help of person with disabilities so that they can ask for different things, because sometimes we prioritize that food is needed, that medicines are needed, but our need is simply a counselor, simply a helper, simply a person who can say good things to us. Sometimes we don't need ration or these things for the survival, because to keep our mentally balanced, we need some emotional support. That emotional support should be there with us in these times. How much time I have? Hello? Hello?
Asha ji, you're going to unmute yourself.
Minute. 1 minute, Mr. Tak.
1 minute.
Tak Saab, 1 minute.
Okay. So summing up these situations, I can say that all types of person with disabilities should accept their disability, keep their mental balance. They should be very strong, having the willpower. Odd situations always go. Every time there is a night, but after every night there is day. We can be mentally strong, we have the survival power. We should utilize all those things which can keep us mentally balanced. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tak Saab. I would like to tell our viewers that Tak Saab has only been able to come on audio because of poor connectivity in J&K. So that's why his video was not available. But I think, as you rightly say, Tak Saab, we can use the COVID as an opportunity to build the database. And one good thing is that the NDMA and the SDMA have already recognized They have given 5% reservation to people with disabilities. We need trainers, we need professionals. We need to speak well, we all need to be good human beings. And thank you so much for everything. And now we come on to our second speaker, Mrs. Shubhra, instituted in 2003. Instituted in 2003, the Ibufa Nina Sibal Memorial Award pays tribute to organizations working with people with special needs, particularly children, while employing innovative information and assistive technologies. Our next speaker is Mrs. Shubhra Mukherjee, co-founder, Udan. Shubhra-ji, our deepest condolences on Shubhra-ji, our deepest condolences on the passing away of your dear husband, Dr. Arun Mukherjee. The 15th Ibufa Nina Sibal Memorial Award in 2017 was awarded to Dr. Arun Mukherjee, founder, director, Udan for the Disabled, for his pioneering work for training and early medical intervention of people suffering from autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and others. Mrs. Shubhra Mukherjee.
Hello. Good evening, everybody. We are having a little bit of a problem with regards the microphone that we have here. It keeps getting disconnected. So I will be playing the presentation for everybody to view and speaking at, hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear. We can hear you. We can hear you. Parajita, we can hear you.
Hello.
Yes,
hello.
We
okay.
can hear you.
Yeah, I think we lost connection there. And
I think just continue
the mic
straight.
will be handled
Yes.
by Anju. The mic will be handled by Mrs. Anju Saxena.
Okay.
So I think that'll be easier. I'll just play the presentation from our end. Yeah. If there's just a bit of a rukawat ke liye khede situation, just 2 minutes, please.
In case the video is, you cannot play the PPT, can you talk about it? Mental health. Parajita? Shubhra-ji?
Yeah.
Yes. Shubhra-ji, please unmute. Ibufa has the PPT. Should we play it?
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay. Tech team, please play.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mrs. Anju Saxena here. I'm working with Udan as consultant director. Today, I will be presenting on behalf of Udan. So as you all know, that Udan has been working in the field of disability with children with disability and young adults also. Can we move on, ma'am? So this is all about Udan. We have been working for years in different fields of disability and in community also. Can we move ahead? Yeah, so today I'm going to present on behalf of Ms. Shubhra Mukherjee on COVID-19. Previous slide, please. Yeah. Today I'm going to present on behalf of Shubhra Mukherjee on pandemic effect on children with disability and a way ahead. We are, we all have been facing this difficulty. This pandemic is going on for long now. Like our dear students with disability, they all have been stuck at home for last 3 to 4 months. They are not able to connect, as Mr. Javed also said, they are not able to connect with their therapists, they are not able to connect with their schools. So how to go about it in this difficult period, during this difficult period? Yeah, we need to move on. So what all effects we are going to talk about today? This pandemic has had major effect on our students with disability also, and on general students also, in education also. Like if you look at their physical progress, they are not in connect with their therapists, they are not in connect with their special education setups or therapy setups. So somewhere their progress is being blocked. They are not able to do therapies, they are not able to follow the routine, normal special education routine or normal skill-based development routine. So somewhere it is really hindering with their development. The routine is broken. They had a structured routine. Parents also had a structured routine. They were going to office. Their children were going to these schools. There was a big, big relaxation for the parents also, because these children were, busy somewhere, busy and truthfully busy. Like they were getting something, they were learning something. But during this pandemic time, when they're not able to connect with their therapist, when they're not able to connect with the teachers, their sensory needs are increasing. Like he said, children with ADHD, children with autism, children with sensory dysfunctions, their sensory needs are also on shoot. It is really going high at this time because of less intervention, because of irregular intervention. Parents are able to do something what they know, what they can do, but sometimes parents are not able to do because they are also very busy with household chores, and they are also, somewhere that stress is also going on. So physical and mental pressure. Families are under some physical pressure also, and families are under some mental pressure also. They are like, anxiety level is high, stress level is high, future is uncertain. This is what we all are thinking. We all are going through this kind of a phase. So no structured program for our children. So their needs are increasing, and sometimes these needs are not being fulfilled. Next slide, please. Yeah. So how to cope up with the present scenario? What to do now in this online period? What to do on this distance learning period? Yeah. Which is already difficult for our general students also, for students who are doing general education also. But then it is more difficult for those children who are having disability, for having difficulty. So, how to go about it? First of all, what I feel that not only these children with disability, not only these young adults with disability, but parents also. Everybody at home also should have a regular routine, regular structured routine. Regular guidance and counseling for these parents have to be planned. Somewhere, online. We all should be offline also available for the parents, online also available for the parents. We can just make a call to them. We can just talk to them. We can go on a Zoom call. We can use video calls. We can use some other softwares to connect with the parents and to connect with the children. In this way, somewhere we are able to hear out the parents. We are able to listen to our children's needs. And when we are listening to them, when we are listening to the parents' needs, we can work, we can, guide them, counsel them for how to go about it, or we can just have live sessions for them on Zoom. So regular structured routine also has to be followed. Dealing with physical issues, structured therapies, special education program, if it can be planned in a brief way, in a structured way, on Zoom, or on video WhatsApp call if the technology is not available to the parent. So somewhere accessibility and equity also we have to keep it in mind. Everybody doesn't have a resource at home. Some of our children are poor. They're under poverty line also. Some of our children are like just low middle class. They don't have their own resources on laptops. So what to do in that case? You know, everybody has a phone nowadays. Everybody is digital in some way or the other way. So using the technology or using whatever they have, access to them, we have to reach them. Either we reach them, you know, through live sessions, or we reach them like by talking to them, just by explaining it to them that how to go about it. Then somewhere as we have been listening and we have been talking and we have been doing it and believing in this at Udan also, we have to apply the holistic approach. Mental health through mindfulness, through yoga, through, you know, meditation and all, and some music therapy, and releasing the anxiety. You need to release the anxiety of a parent. You need to listen to the parent. You need to listen to the children. Sometimes they don't know. They are anxious. What is happening? They are stuck within the limited within the four walls. They don't know what to do. Sometimes this increases the anxiety, and they don't know how to express themselves. So we need to help them with releasing the anxiety. We need to listen to them. We need to plan something which is structured, which is brief, which is simple, which can be carried on at home, which can be carried on by parents. And we need to train the parents. Online training of parents is very important. Online guidance counseling of the parent, empathy building, sensitization of the siblings, because their siblings may be working, maybe studying, or maybe just at home. They may not, you know, they may also be disturbed, or their routine also may also be disturbed. So they may also go upset. So looking at their routine, looking at their acceptance level, you need to sensitize them also. So sometimes the family sensitization also becomes important. Husband-wife relationships, maybe like, you know, if a child has difficulty, sometimes it leads to the difficult relations also. Sometimes there is no acceptance by one partner. So in that case, we really need to counsel the parent. The counseling has to go on. Next slide, please. So what are the key points today? Routine. Structured routine is a must for everyone. It has to have mindfulness, it has to have yoga, or, you know, whatever you can plan within that scenario, within that home structure, within that financial structure, or within that, you know, family structure, depending upon the family structure. Empathy building. Are siblings understanding what are the needs of their sibling? Are they understanding that my sibling who has a difficulty, maybe a child with autism, maybe a child with ADHD with language impairment, maybe that child is not able to express. So how to understand my sibling? Then I just said sensitization, sensitizing each other, sensitizing maybe the neighbors also. If a child is going out or wants to go out in balcony, or wants to, you know, or maybe making some noise, or maybe like, you know, screaming, or maybe making out some sounds or some self-stimulating activities he is doing. Then patience and resilience. What I feel that we have to move down with the flow, but we have to be patient. We all have to have hope. Where there is a hope, there is a, you know, there is you can see some rays of hope. So you can go ahead in your life. We all know that uncertainty is there. We all know that it is a very difficult time with our children with difficulty, disability. But at the same time, we all know that we all can hope for the best. Things will be fine. So somewhere we need to, you know, be very, very positive. Positive approach, attitude is very important during this time. Calming yourself down through music therapy, through like art therapy at home, or like joining where you're involving your children in household chores, small activities at home like non-gas cooking, like cleaning. So somewhere these skills can be trained at home. So this is what we need to really look at. We really need to look at, you know, what kind of home-based therapy, how can we adapt the therapy program, how can we simplify the therapy program at home level, how can we simplify the special education goals at home level, so that we can train our children in such a way that they should be like, you know, getting some kind of training at home also. So this is how we need to go about it. The next slide, sir. Yeah, structured routine program within limitations. Exercise, maintaining precautions. Yes, definitely we all know that we can go out, but then we have to take lot of precautions. Sometimes we can't teach our children that don't touch this, don't touch that, move carefully, move consciously. You cannot touch others. You have to maintain the distance. But exercise is also very important for such a child. So how will we do? Like we can make them go out in a during the period when very less people are outside, when we are there with them to take care of them, involving them in structured simple household chore tasks, music and art therapy, as I said, online session with therapists, special educators and counselors, sensitization of sibling and family. The next slide, please. So don't leave any stone unturned, but we need to be structured. It cannot go haywire. We need to break the barrier, but in a structured way. So holistic approach is a must, but structured approach is also a must. And cooperation with each other, positive attitude, helping each other and going along with each other. So this is what I would like to say in today's session. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Team Udan. We have a suggestion from Dr. Parbati Prasad Raut in the chat box. And she has suggested if this PPT can be shared, then they would like to have access to it. Because you have said so many things. You have said so many things about having a structured program, how to go about everything. And of course, the sense of touch, which is so important. If physical touch during lockdown is not possible, at least people can speak to each other because of technology. Another thing I would like to, thank you. Another thing I would like to say, Taq Saab and Team Udan, please stay on till the end because lots of questions are coming in for you and we'll be having the question and answer session towards the end. Now we come on to our final speaker in the awardee series. She is Mrs. Mary Barua. She and her organization hold a special place in our hearts. As the first Nina Sibal Memorial Award in 2003 was awarded to Mrs. Mary Barua, President, Action for Autism, New Delhi, for her work in that organization. Ms. Barua is a disability activist who has tried to have autism recognized as the communication disorder disability towards attracting greater attention to its management, both by the victim and the family and others working with them. Mrs. Mary Barua.
Thank you, Asha ji. How much time do I have?
15 minutes.
Okay, all right. So thank you very much. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here speaking to the group. And as you mentioned that as the first recipient of the Nina Sibal Award, I have to say that was also the first award we ever received. And we had no idea we were going to get an award. We got a call one day to say that we've been selected for this. And then we tried to find out what the Nina Sibal Award was all about. And it was one of the most amazing days in the early years of the organization. So thank you so much. Before I start, I just want to offer my condolence. Please. Offer my condolence to Mrs. Shubhra Mukherjee. I had no idea that Dr. Mukherjee had passed away. Really sorry to hear of her loss. This was a bit of a shock for me. So yes, so like I was saying that, you know, our connection with the Lady Irving College and the Nina Sibal Award has been special. And so what I want to do now is that just mention a little bit about what AFA does. I'm trying to figure out how to get it onto the, sorry, I figured it out because I'm now, okay, here it is. Yeah. Is it showing my PowerPoint?
It's starting now. It's
okay,
starting
great.
now.
Okay, great, great. That's brilliant. Okay, so I'll keep talking anyway while it's coming on. One of the, I just want to start quickly by saying what we do as an organization. We work in the area of education. We have a special needs school as well as working in inclusive education. We do a lot of educational intervention with children who go to other centers. We also run training programs for professionals, as well as a lot of parent empowerment programs. And that's actually some of our watershed programs are to do with parent empowerment, because a lot of these parents have eventually changed profession and become special needs professionals and started organizations across the country as well as outside. So that part of our work is also very dear to us, in addition to running trainings like a B.Ed program, diploma program, and a lot of short trainings, as well as doing trainings with organizations in other cities who we support in setting up schools, running schools, etc. We are also involved in advocacy work for the rights, as Ashaji mentioned. But the other area of our advocacy work that is now slowly taking precedence, and we're very happy about that, is trying to get people with autism themselves be, people who speak for themselves rather than parents, professionals, and other family members speaking on their behalf. So we are working towards getting people with autism to become self-advocates. We are involved in a certain amount of research as well. And the other bit of work that we do is adult services. And the adult services include sheltered workplaces, as well as getting people to work in open employment, as well as supporting people in relationship issues, family issues, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of work in adult services, but the core of our work is in clinical services. I just wanted to ask that I can't see my presentation, so I have no idea which slide we are on. Can everybody else see my presentation?
Yes, you're in a topsy-turvy world.
Okay, all right, great. So we are in a topsy-turvy world. So basically what happens is that... Okay, just to quickly add that in addition to the work that we do, there are a couple of other things that we have been doing in the time of relief, and I'll quickly mention because it is not directly related to what I will say. We have been involved in a certain amount of relief work, which is one of the relief work is with people with disabilities, families of people with disabilities who are going through a really tough time. So we raised money in a collaborative effort to provide them with dry rations, and we did that for 2 months. And we touched about 3,100 individuals through that, rations as well as medicines. And we also have been, and that is still continuing, providing food to indigent laborers who are stuck without any employment and have run out of all resources. So that is a part of work we're still doing. And we were also very fortunate to, through a grant-making agency, to be able to get a certain amount of financial support for those students who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. So in our work, about 50% of the people we reach out to are from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. They could be people with high support needs, low support needs, etc., but all kinds. So when the lockdown happened, even before the lockdown started, we had stopped some of our programs where there was a lot of proximity because we felt it would not be very good. And then we started, we thought that we have a plan of action that will help us to know how to go forward, but that did not quite happen. And suddenly, as we all know, the lockdown happened one night. And when it happened, it was hugely unsettling for people with autism. As one of the earlier speakers mentioned, that we all need a certain amount of, we all need a certain amount of structure in our lives and a certain amount of predictability. But when you have autism, the way you sense the world is completely different from everybody else. And what you really need is predictability and predictability and predictability. And that is the thing that suddenly went off, so that, the family members who would go out are all sitting there. I'm not going out anywhere. I'm not going to school. I'm not going to my favorite places. We're just not going anywhere. We're sitting in the house. So everything kind of changed suddenly in one day. And that was extremely unsettling. And what started happening is that we got calls from parents who started saying that their children were out of control, they did not want to do, and they were afraid what would happen to their children if they got COVID, etc., etc. So what we started doing in order to develop coping mechanisms and also to help develop resilience, etc., is that we decided a few things that we would have to do. One is, and I don't know if the slide is showing, is that we started talking to families about providing predictability to their children. We said, give them predictability, and I'm showing a slide, I don't know if it's showing, where there is it shows like, what we do through the day. So this is the kind of structure, that visual structure that we use a lot in our work. We've been talking to the families about it, but we know what happens, it gets hard to implement everything that is happening with the therapist or at school, at home also. But now that this situation has happened, we explained to the families, and all of them jumped in and started providing the structure that they needed. And we explained to them how to do it, how to structure the individual's entire day, because we knew that once they did that, a lot of the challenges that they were facing would go. So providing structure was one of the most important things that we suggested. We gave them ideas on how they could make a little calendar for the day and put in, what they would be doing, whether they'd be academic work, whether they'd be relaxing, having lunch, taking their bath. Just fill it in and let the kids see it the day before and see it the day itself and know this is what is going to happen in my life, right? Then in addition to that, providing visual structure, the other thing that we did was help the families talk about the virus, because the kids are hearing about the virus all the time, because families are putting on their televisions, they're discussing amongst themselves. And yet with people with autism, what often happens is we presume, oh, ye kuch nahi samajhta hai, bolne ka zarurat nahi hai. So nobody talks to the person with autism to tell them what is happening, right? So there is all this stress going on in the kids. They're hearing this discussion. There seems to be fear in the air. They're talking about everybody getting sick. So we help the families understand how to talk to their children about the whole COVID-19 that is happening around them, right? We talk to them also about the crisis, about hand washing and how hand washing has to happen, how to wear masks, what would happen with that. And a lot of them also do fear what will happen to my child. So if he gets COVID-19, so we tell the families the first thing you have to do is work on your anxiety. If you're anxious, you're going to convey that anxiety to your child. And your child will not be able to tell you, I'm feeling anxious, what I should do. So don't get anxious. It is a difficult time, but we will all get through it. All we have to do is be very, very careful. We told the families how to stay informed, but not to go on social media too much, because that created more anxiety. Not to overload with information. We also suggested that they make posters for their children, which they could put up in their rooms or talk to them on the computer if they made it on the computer, but many of them don't have computers. So we said you can just make a poster on how to hand wash. You may get some information on your mobile. Share that with your child. Talk to them about how they should cover their mouth. Don't tell them why are you doing and why are you doing that. Simply tell them what has to be done. We shared with them some of the posters we had. We shared the social stories where we talked about, that there are germs around and what we can do about it, etc. So essentially, we help the parents make the whole place a comfortable place, so that in this whole frightening situation, they give the kid with autism a haven of security, so that helps them to stay comfortable and not have what they call behavior, because behaviors only come from anxiety. And the next thing we did was to start online sessions. That was a very important thing we realized that we did. Our online sessions, as soon as around the time the first lockdown was getting over, we figured this is going to carry on. We planned online sessions and we started off. Now, in doing the online sessions, the most important thing is to remember that with people with autism, we had worked for years on years on teaching them how to be social. That you have to be around other people, you have to be close to other people, be able to tolerate proximity, which is very difficult if you're on the spectrum. That is something we actually teach them, to sit next to other people and eat, to sit around other people around the table. Now we moved away from all of that. Now we told them, now go back online and work from home, where you don't see any of the people next to you that you're used to. Of course, before starting all of this, we had to find out how much of accessibility there was. And it's true that some of like I said, our families come from all kinds of backgrounds. Most of them had an Android phone, but there are a few who do not have an Android phone. And a small number could not at all participate, though many of them managed to get their neighbors' phones in order to participate in the online sessions we had. when planning the sessions, we had to keep the varied needs in mind because all the kids were at different levels. Even the kids in the class are in different levels, right? We also had to help the parents learn how to help their children learn. And that, I think, is one of the best outcome of all of the work that we did. Because the parents learn for the first time. Earlier, we would talk to them and it would not quite happen. Now they actually learn how to give their children structure, how to help them to sit down, how to make them learn. They learned all this. So it turned out into a great learning experience for the parents as well, right? They learned how to hold their child's interest and attention. And of course, our teaching had to be the same way as well. And in the teaching, we again had structure and predictability. The parents would get a list of everything that would happen the next day so that they could share with the children, and the children were prepared for what was going to happen. So there was a lot of work that was planned, that was done in order to make the online learning successful. And we wondered how our kids would do staring at a little mobile phone, which is all that most of them had. But it was amazing. I mean, we were completely floored by how they learned. Of course, like I said, we provided visual structure and predictability. We made it fun. If we don't make it fun, of course, the kids won't be motivated. So the sessions were fun. We built in things that was enjoyable for them. We made it motivating for the families as well, so that they could see their progress, stay positive, and really enjoy the whole thing. And the thing, and just to quickly share a few pictures of those. So these are just some pictures of the various online sessions that we had, where the kid was working, they made things, the parents helped them make it, they shared those things. We also worked with adults because we have an adult section, and the vocational was not working, but instead, all the people who come to our sheltered workplace, we worked on various life skills, like learning about priorities. What is more important in life? What you actually need to spend on, and what you have to spend on, and what you need not spend on. So, working on priorities and all kinds of stuff, doing household work, etc. And like I said, we did a lot of appreciation of the kids. And we also remembered to appreciate our parents, because after all, it's the parents who are doing a lot of the work. We are working together. It is a partnership. But when you do online work with people with disabilities and people like autism who need support, it's the parents who are actually doing a lot of the work. So in that, we also did things like had a little video, and I'll show a little bit of that. I don't know if you see that.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea.
So the teachers are holding up thank you notes for the parents. This is basically that. The teachers.
If you ever find yourself lost in.
So basically, here we have all the teachers holding up thank you notes for the parents when the session ended just before the summer break. We have a 2-week summer break happening right now in the last 2 weeks of June. And so in the last session, the teachers did a little thank you, because the parents are the ones who are doing so much of the work. One of the things that we've learned, let me put the voice on. All right. So one of the things that we learned is that, when we had queries about whether the kids would learn or not online, we knew they could learn. And we learned that the parents benefited, and we learned so much about our kids, which now we realize that even after we open up, and we are going to open up now, I'll talk a little bit about that. We know that when we open up, our kids will still do certain amount of online work, because we know that they can learn like that. They look forward to their classes. They waited every day for when my next class will happen. So that was one of the most amazing things that happened with this whole online teaching. We also did online training for our parents. Like I said, we have a parent empowerment program. And of course, our online training for teachers carries on. That has carried on regardless. And so one of the things that we kept saying was, so I'm going to get out of here. Okay. So one of the things is that we kept telling the families is that talk to the kids about the families and the teachers also, talk to the children about COVID. Be calm in the explanations that you give, because when you are calm, they are calm. Talk about hand washing. Right now, we are also working on the children on wearing masks, because when we reopen, and we are planning our reopening now, we are hoping to reopen sometime in July, the kids will all have to wear masks. So many of our online sessions are actually about wearing masks. How do we wear masks? And in fact, all our young people with autism, have got holiday homework where they have a chart. They start by keeping the mask on for 5 minutes and they slowly build up so that they're able to keep their mask on for hours. That is what they will do as a part of their holiday homework through the 2-week break that we have. So we are already got them to work on these things. We know that there are challenges when we talk about washing hands. Some of our people, they will live in homes, so we have a shared bathroom. You don't have running water to be washing hands all the time, and they cannot afford sanitizers. That's the bottom line. They cannot afford sanitizers. So it is difficult for many of them. Physical distancing is not possible really. Many of them need personal assistance. When we open up, that is one of the things that we're trying to factor in. Many of our young people need assistance while we work with them. Like Javed mentioned, it happens with a lot of people with physical disabilities. That's true with also a lot of people with intellectual disabilities, autism, etc., where they need personal assistance for their work. So we are working out the SOPs on how that will happen when we open up and the children come. We cannot just go and catch them. We have to work, what kind of protective suits we have to wear, etc. So all of those things are something we'll have to talk about. We have to discuss when we reopen. Of course, we're also discussing the what will happen in case somebody gets infected, right? So those are the kinds of things. How will the bathroom be divided when people go in? How will the classrooms be divided when we reopen? So opening up is a huge thing that we're still working on. We're still developing. The best practices when we start again is something that is, it's still a work in progress. It's not something that we're doing completely on our own. We are actually working on our own, as well as talking to 2 other organizations who we know have similar situations and we have similar ways of thinking. So we are working on what those SOPs will be and how. And once we do that, we will share it with everybody, because that's something we do with all the work that we do. We've held about 3 webinars where we've talked to parents and professionals on how to deal with the COVID, right? So we do share what we are doing with others. And when we develop the SOPs for, opening up 2 or whatever, if that happens in July, those are things that we will have to, we are working on, which we will share with other people, and we will have to implement. There'll be a lot of physical restructuring that will also have to take place in our place of work. But before I end, I just want to add that even while I talk about all of this, I know that there are some of our young people with autism who have also lost their jobs. There are young people with autism who are going through huge anxiety, especially the ones who are very able. They go online and they look at various things. So we are working with them and helping them deal with that. And the ones who lost their jobs, that's one of the worst blows, because when you're on the spectrum and you manage to get yourself a job, and then when people are laying off, they lay you off as one of the first people. That's a tough one to deal with. But that is something that we are working with. And finally, the one thing that we tell everybody, when you're a parent, whether you're working at a center when you restart, or we're talking with the professionals we are training, remember to stay connected. You don't have to be physically present to stay connected. Connect over a WhatsApp, which makes things far simpler these days. Connect over phone. Connect any way you can. But stay connecting, because that's one of the best ways to take care of mental health. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Mary Barua. So like all the speakers said, structure and inculcating predictability. And of course, everybody is innovating in the time of COVID. And we look forward to the standard operating procedures that we can replicate, which people and organizations can scale up, and which we can utilize. And of course, we are overturning all our old beliefs, like you said. Earlier, it used to be social meeting, now it is social distancing and technology. So I think the way forward will be technology and meeting up. Thank you so much. And please, all the speakers, please stay on. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat box, and we'll be addressing them after this, the final speaker and the way forward. Our specialist speaker for this webinar on mental health is Ms. Chitra Sarkar. She retired as an executive director, Air India, and now devotes her time to various social and cultural causes. She is the Joint Secretary of IWAFA. Ms. Chitra Sarkar.
Thank you, Mrs. Asha Chandra, and namaskar, everyone. In my paper today, I will discuss 3 population segments that are at heightened risk of mental ill health in this current COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown. I have chosen 3 different groups from 3 different socio-economic substrata to show that this risk can occur in different lifestyle parameters. However, I do want to point out that these are not the only groups at risk. There are several others that have entered the hazard zone because of the peculiar nature of COVID-19. But for now, we will discuss just these 3. Give me a moment to start my slideshow. Okay, so we are going to be looking at 3 high-risk groups that have entered the vulnerable zone because of COVID-19. The first group that I would like to highlight is one that has stricken the conscience of the country. We have been seeing photographs of daily wage migrants, the elderly, even small children, trudging hundreds of miles trying to reach home during the lockdown. And it has moved us all greatly. But we must remember that even in the best of times, daily wage migrant labor is under very heavy mental strain. The data, are you following the slides with me, or has it not reached you? Can someone confirm that my slides are visible?
Yes, your slides are on. We have the picture, the high-risk groups.
Okay, now can you see the slide that says daily wage migrants?
Yes, that is on.
Okay. Okay, so now I'm moving on to the next one, my third slide. You can see a third slide with a lot of data. Okay, so the National Sample Survey 2008 has said that 28% of the Indian workforce is migrant labor, and the census of 2011 found that 454 million migrants work as laborers in India. That same National Sample Survey, the 64th round in 2008, also discovered a very sad statistic. No, not yet, of course, we're not there yet. 43% of the population in Mumbai and Delhi is migrant. However, the size of the population of migrants has not kept up with their uptake of policy initiatives, such as access to health measures or free food or education, because of their lack of documentation and their lack of ignorance and their ignorance. But we must remember that they live under very, very trying circumstances. There is a positive correlation between mental disorders and adverse conditions of living. And this is very true of the migrants who live in extreme poverty, often face financial debt, gender inequality, low education, uncertain income because of seasonal work, and they're often ostracized by the local community because of their different languages and customs, and their living conditions are often quite abject. So when you consider all these strains that they already work under, it is hardly surprising that this very sad statistic has been recorded, that the National Crime Records Bureau report of 2018 found that 22.4% of all suicides, that is 1 in every 5 suicides, is that of a daily wage earner. The COVID-19 outbreak and the nationwide lockdown resulted in job losses and financial disaster for the migrant population and has left them very far away from home, all of which can affect their mental health. They belong to the most marginalized sections of society and they are dependent on daily wages for their livelihood. Their immediate concern during the pandemic are shortage of food and shelter, fear of infection, and anxiety and fear. And also, as I mentioned, ostracism from local communities who also feel that they have taken the job opportunities that rightly belong to the local community. There could also be an increased danger of suicides considering their poor utilization of health services in general and mental health services in particular. So in times of such extreme distress, migrant laborers will need very strong and conscious social protection measures. A focused approach is required to ensure that mental health services reach them. And this is something that is going to be a challenge for the government, for civil society, for the medical profession, and NGOs like ourselves should take note of this fact. Let me now come to the second group of high-risk patients. And these are patients who have actually contracted COVID-19 and are on their way to recovery. Studies have found that patients who have contracted COVID-19 and have been sick enough for intensive care may be at risk for a particular syndrome called the post-intensive care syndrome, or PICS, which combines physical, cognitive, and mental infirmities. A research team from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore found that PICS can greatly impact the quality of life in the long term and the short term, not only for patients, but also for their family and caregivers. Patients who suffer from PICS may experience anxiety, sleep disorders, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and because of the nature of the disease, the enforced isolation during treatment and recovery intensifies the symptoms of PICS. For example, while during treatment, while in the ICU, doctors wearing full PPE suits may frighten a vulnerable patient, and the isolation and the absence of visitors could lead to further distress. So hospitals must consciously do their best to humanize the ICU experience. Talking to a family member on the telephone, if possible, would be a great morale booster. Studies have found that delirium occurred in about 65% of patients in ICU with COVID-19. However, there are measures whereby these risks can be reduced to a great extent, and they are medical counseling, of course, counseling the patient to expect these symptoms and to be mentally prepared for them. Then it has been found that exposure to sunlight and helping the patient to maintain their circadian rhythms, that is their sleep schedule, helps a lot. I've also mentioned that contact with family and a more human approach in the ICU and the recovery ward goes a long way in enabling the patient to maintain some mental strength. Mental health has to be taken very seriously even after the patient has been discharged, and counseling has to be provided to look for symptoms of PICS in the weeks and months after physical recovery. It can be overwhelming to go back home after a long and stressful illness, and in this particular case, it is exacerbated because patients may go home to an economy that is in crisis, jobs have been lost, and basic necessities are sometimes difficult to get. And there is, of course, the continued physical isolation. All this increases the risk of long-term psychiatric complications such as anxiety and depression. A study conducted in May last month in the Netherlands showed that there could be a very high incidence of PICS among the recovering population of COVID-19, and counseling and medical rehabilitation have become very crucial. Let us now go on to our third group, which is air travelers. Recently, after the lockdown restrictions were eased to some extent, air travelers have the option of taking a flight, although the flights are very restricted and under much more severe constraints than previously. These constraints include the passengers having to wear masks and gloves at the airport itself and on board during the flight. There are no meal services, those are severely curtailed. Just a packet of sealed food is kept on the passenger's seat before he boards. And the cabin crew are completely wrapped up in their PPE suits and instructed to keep social distance. All this can be quite unnerving even for a short flight. But imagine an international flight of 10 hours, or even like Delhi, San Francisco is 14 hours under these restrictions. And even for a normally healthy passenger, this would be stressful. But imagine traveling with a small child, or traveling as an elderly person, or in the worst case scenario with prior mental health conditions. So, this new style of air travel involves a lot of stressors and could lead to possible psychotic episodes in those passengers that have a previous history of mental illness or mental vulnerability. This can be triggered by loss of sleep and jet lag. It has been found that travel across time zones is especially risky for a person who is already dealing with mental illness. One theory is that people with mental illness may already have altered circadian rhythms, which makes it harder for them to adjust to jet lag. Loss of sleep and change of time zones are therefore very, very stressful to people with mental vulnerabilities. Elderly passengers face special risks. If they have already entered into the early stages of dementia, or if they have experienced an emotional trauma such as the loss of a spouse, they would be at heightened risk. Psychosis on board and during travel can also be triggered by certain medications. For example, there is a drug called mefloquine, which is used to combat malaria, but people with previous history of mental illness are recommended that they should take another drug even if they're traveling to malaria-infested area. Similarly, medical marijuana can lead to psychotic episodes on board. So it is very essential that all medication should be administered with very great caution under the new constrained style of air travel, and people with mental health risk should be closely supervised by qualified medical professionals. We have been discussing a very serious aspect of mental health, but I thought I would end with a slightly lighter aspect of the same ailment. I want to emphasize that while this lighter aspect is fully acknowledged as a medical condition, it makes us wonder how mental health can be affected even in situations that seem favorable. For example, travelers may be subjected to something called the Florence syndrome, which is distress and breathlessness which occurs when exposed to fine art and culture. And it is named the Florence syndrome because it was first identified among tourists who visited Florence, particularly in the Uffizi Gallery. There is also the Jerusalem syndrome, which pilgrims come under because they feel very heightened emotional responses when they visit a holy place like Jerusalem. And the last one is the Tahiti syndrome, where even paradise can lead to mental distress. However, these syndromes, even though they are medically acknowledged, are easily reversed, because when the patient is removed from the distressing environment, he recovers quite rapidly. However, not all mental risk is as easily treated, and many require serious intervention. It is important to note that several new groups in the population have entered this hazard zone, and it is important that we should acknowledge that the need for mental counseling and mental treatment has widened under the COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown. Thank you. Let me just
Thank you.
move out of the.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Sarkar, for sharing the holistic psychological impact of COVID-19 on the 3 segments of our citizens. Well, we can see the shape of things if we do intergalactic travel with all the PPE suits, etc. So on to our next speaker. The way forward with infographics is presented by Assistant Professor of Lady Irwin College and IWAFA Executive Member, Dr. Mayanka Gupta. Over to you, Mayanka.
Good evening, everyone. Talking about mental health as a subject can be quite an emotive topic. Over the past few years, mental health has moved into the foreground as both a challenge and an opportunity for everyone. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, yes, yes.
Shrevya, can you show the first slide? Shrevya, hi, IWAFA team, can you show the first slide? Yeah.
Just give me a minute.
Yeah, sure. So the esteemed panel has given us a spectrum of information regarding the work their respective organizations have been doing, particularly in the field of mental health of the persons with disabilities. They have discussed about the triggers that causes mental health problems and the interventions required. The participants of today's webinar have shown inclination towards exemplifying case studies and best practices in this area. Thus, my presentation will concentrate on the existing situation globally as well as locally, and also the way forward. So the things I'm going to cover will be in brief due to time paucity, but IWAFA team will be sharing links about the policies, case studies that I will be talking about in the chat box so that the participants can download and study them in detail. So today I'm going to explain through the lens of the systems framework of management. It's the first slide hasn't come. IWAFA team, the first slide hasn't come. Should I present from my end?
I think it may be a good idea.
Okay.
Please mute.
Mr. Ramashankar, you need to please switch off your sharing screen. You need to stop sharing. Can I request Mr. Ramashankar Singh to step presenting so that I can present? Thank you so much. Can you see the, is it visible to everyone?
Yet. No,
okay.
No, not as yet. Please do the presentation, Mayanka.
Okay, now is it visible?
Yes, the first screen.
Okay. 1 second, just give me a second. Okay. Yeah. So today I'm going to be explaining through the lens of systems framework of management. I have integrated this approach today to target the concept of mental health. So these are the environmental systems which an individual interacts and is influenced by. So if you can see the blue layer here, this is the macro environment, which is the most expansive system, which includes society, culture, and all the underlying factors within it. And the individual does not participate directly, but it affects our experiences. The near environment, which is being represented by the yellow band, is less personal and provides interlinkages between the various environments. And these are provided by mass media, community services, social welfare services, which have a great power to influence everyone. Then the third layer is the red layer, which is the household environment, which typically involves the personal relationships with family members, peers, classmates, teachers, and caregivers. How these groups or individuals interact with the persons with disabilities will directly affect their mental health. The innermost system are we as individuals and how I interact with myself, my perception, my thoughts, which are very strong factors to influence your own mental health. So following the concept of systems approach to sustainable solutions for mental health of PWDs, we shall be moving with the way forward from the macro environment to the individual environment. Is the third slide visible, macro environment?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So as you can see, as I was telling, that I will be talking about the existing situation and the way forward. So I will be taking a few case studies. So let's see first the situation of India. India's investment in mental health. The last union budget slashed it from 20% from rupees 50 crore to rupees 40 crore. According to the estimates, rupees 93,000 crore will be needed to implement the Mental Healthcare Act 2017. Yesterday, that is June 17th, a petition was filed by Advocate Gaurav Kumar Bansal, who argued that the exclusion of mental illness from insurance coverage violated the fundamental right to equality. Legal authorities issued notice to the Center and the Insurance Regulatory Development Authority on this said issue. Mr. Bansal is of the opinion that insurance policies exempt mental illness despite Section 21(4) of Mental Health Act 2017, which clearly mandates otherwise. This red tapeism in the insurance sector has led to the stigmatization of persons suffering from mental illness. The plugin of the details of it will be plugged in the chat box. Coming to my second country, UK. UK's Coronavirus Act, which became a law on March 23rd, has serious implications for the rights of people with disabilities and older people. Its implementation needs to be carefully monitored to protect people's right to healthcare, education, and freedom. There will be a plugin in the chat box. USA. In the stark contrast to India's, USA has state disability insurance and is implemented during any health crisis, pandemic, or disaster. If one is certified by a doctor about being temporarily or totally disabled, then he or she can be entitled to the benefits of state disability insurance. Kenya. Unlike the other disabilities, psychosocial and intellectual disabilities are the most stigmatized disabilities in Kenya. Persons who have schizophrenia are known to be mentally ill, possessed by evil spirits, or even suffering from a bad omen. Such persons are believed to be dangerous to themselves and others. They are excluded from the mainstream society and denied any life opportunity. Afghanistan. In 2012, Afghanistan ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and its optional protocol. There are very few services to assist and support persons with disability there. On December 3rd, 2018, United Nations Security Council members shot a spotlight on the disproportionate impact of armed conflict on persons with disabilities, leading to the adoption of Security Council Resolution 2475 in June 2019. Mexico. Mexico's Welfare Secretariat hold Human Rights Watch that has calculated the new federal pension to give people with disabilities greater family and individual financial solvency. On May 8th, constitutional amendment established the disability pension as a constitutional right, prioritizing children, indigenous and Afro-Mexican people with disabilities under 64. I know that a lot of my participants today wanted some explanation on what is being done for the indigenous people. Here is the answer from Mexico. You can download the plugin being in the chat box. So what is the way forward in a macro environment? With the second wave of coronavirus pandemic, two things can be adopted. First, India can appoint a minister with a cabinet rank as head of mental health and well-being, and also create an emergency task force of public health experts in creating evidence-based interventions. Second, we need a war footing to push to implement the Mental Health Care Act that promises healthcare to all and introduce a suicide prevention policy. Many countries, including China, have been able to significantly reduce suicides after they implemented the suicide prevention policy. In order to have institutional policy and legal framework, there is an urgent need of sensitizing professionals, policy makers, legislators, and members of the public on disability rights of persons living with mental illness. Conditions of persons living with mental illness needs positive interventions with their full consent. Forced intervention is a violation of their rights. Fourth, the public should be empowered with information on the difference between intellectual and psychosocial disability to encourage quality interventions for different types of disabilities. Fifth, there is a need to empower persons living with mental illnesses with knowledge of their identity as persons living with psychosocial disability. Last, persistent and vibrant initiatives aiming at addressing the deep-rooted cultural, social, and religious stigma currently associated with psychosocial and intellectual disabilities is required. Now coming to the near environment, here are the few case studies. Oceania, Niamey National, a community mental health service, delivers a range of community support services for more than 25 years in diverse communities of Australia, New Zealand, Victoria. We are sharing the web link so that you can study their intervention model at the community level. India. On March 26th, Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities issued disability inclusive guidelines to secure their protection and safety. NGOs have come forward with helpline numbers to cater to the people with disabilities. Once a call is received on the helpline, it is forwarded to the district coordinator, who deputes a volunteer who is in close to the needy person. They then buy the required essentials and deliver against payment. List of such NGOs in India has been plugged in for the benefit of the participants. Peru. In Peru, guidelines were issued by government to reach out to persons with disabilities by phone during the crisis and also in person after the emergency is lifted, especially to report situations of violence to the authorities. Peru also has a quota system with employers asking to hire 5% of workers with disabilities in the public sector and 3% in the private sector. Afghanistan. Afghan women and girls with disabilities face intersecting forms of discrimination. A number of Afghan NGOs offer programs to support PWDs, ranging from rehabilitative services to vocational training. However, there is no NGO representing persons with disabilities in Afghanistan. Japan and Montenegro. Some of these countries have set a quota system requiring that companies employ a specified percentage of disabled people to pay a fine, but it is no guarantee. The fines are usually low, so the companies pay the fine rather than hire the disabled workers. Egypt. To improve the mental health care, 134 physicians and 75 nurses were trained in mental health issues, which showed a marked increase after post-training. An evaluation protocol was developed for the training of these supervisors and psychiatrists. Mental health training materials were developed in 6 areas: And those areas are brain and behavior, mental health prevention and promotion, sign of mental illness, major psychiatric illness, psychiatric emergencies, drug abuse, communication skills, referral and recording. So what is the way forward? We can have campaigns on awareness of mental health issues through radio, social media, digital news portals, and so on. The term Divyang has been enacted in the PWD Act 2016, and such programs like Divyang Kumbh Mela held at Allahabad should be promoted to raise awareness. Doorstep delivery should be ensured for free and affordable rates, which could save time and promote mental well-being. Direct cash system can be provided through the public distribution system, which indirectly will promote the mental well-being. There should be a separate rehabilitation and quarantine centers for PWDs. Special training may be required for health personnel to deal with PWDs when quarantined. Reasonable accommodation can reduce the risk of contamination. For example, Australia has reserved a separate time slot in supermarkets only for PWDs and senior citizens. In general, we can say that more emphasis should be placed on physical aids and equipments, specialist support such as therapies, rehabilitation, medication, support with learning and education, and definitely community support. Next, we come to the household environment. A lot has been discussed.
Excuse me, Mayanka, only half of your PPT is showing. The other half is not showing.
Is it
If
visible
it is
now?
possible? No. Yes, now it is.
Okay.
Thank you. It's visible, and lots of questions coming in also.
Yeah, I'll just be a little fast.
Yeah,
Just little bit is left. In household environment, lot has been discussed by our panelists already. I just want to mention that in 2020, Human Rights Watch published a report named Better to Make Yourself Invisible, which talked about the violence, family violence against people with disabilities. It has remained largely a very invisible phenomena with many hidden victims. So lack of basic supplies can generate very uncertainty, anxiety, anguish, and stress to the family. So promoting and facilitating distant interaction between peers, between the families, training of caregivers and health professionals, respecting their legal capacity to make their own decisions. They should be also given flexibility at some of the areas as way forwards. Coming to the last, that is your own individual environment, I have to say that adjusting to this life might be very difficult, but you can still think about how to cope with your own disability. Having bad days is normal. Don't try to ignore or suppress your feelings. Learn as much as possible about your disability and be your own advocate. Find ways to minimize your disability's impact. I can just say that in today's environment, in today's scenario, no environment can function in isolation. Whole systems have to work with each other so that we lead to a holistic approach, and all these systems are interdependent and influence each other. Last, I want to show some of the reflections which our participants have shared. When they were asked that what is the first thing that comes to their mind when they hear the word mental health of persons with disabilities, and these are the reflections. I can just say that whether it is positive or negative, all of this culminates into one thing, and that is hope. So in the face of these challenges, I can say the greatest gift you can give is those you lead and those you love is the invitation to discover hope. It won't appear on its own, especially for the most fragile one. Take time to sit with them together, excavate what be the most vital resource that they need to weather this storm. I hope all of us will do that. Thank you so much. I come back now to the question and answers. Can I have all my panelists back?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, just give me a second. I need to just bring it back and the questions. So,
yeah, we are here.
Yeah, so my first question is to Ms. Mary Barua. Rupal Tomar, teacher trainee of Lady Irwin College, wants to know how to deal with intellectually disabled students online in this pandemic. Miss Mary Barua.
Sorry. Yeah. So I was talking about individuals with autism, of course, but amongst them we also have children who have intellectual disabilities, right? So the things that work for kids with autism will also work with children with intellectual disabilities. We have to give them a lot of predictability, give them structure, prepare them for what is going to happen, make the teaching very clear, break it down in a way that makes sense to them. And then, of course, prep the parent so that the parent is able to support them properly. And finally, the most important thing is make the whole session fun, keeping in mind what the child's interests are. Because if the session is fun, the child will, in the beginning, some of the children, the first few sessions, they might just wander around a bit. But if you keep it really fun, by the second or third session, they're sitting down and attending to what you're doing and what you're teaching.
Thank you so much, ma'am. My next question is to Mr. Javed Ahmed Tak. Yashika Malhotra, student of Lady Irving College, wants to know what are the policy level decisions that can be taken regarding the mental health of PWDs?
Policy level decisions are so many because when there exists a strong policy in a country, then only there will be the budget, the proper mechanism to follow the empowerment policy. So I can suggest that at least educational policy, accessibility or the reasonable accommodation, and employment. These are the three factors on which there should be a clear policy for the empowerment of these children or the person with disability.
Thank you. Miss Mary ma'am, Nitika Malhotra wants to know, again, a student of Lady Irving College wants to know how to handle one with low mental health during this pandemic.
Could you explain what you mean by low mental health?
These are the questions. These were sent to us earlier by the participants by registering.
So I'm not sure what that means actually. What is low mental health? Is she referring to somebody who's mentally disturbed, or?
I think, ma'am, yes.
Okay. So what was the question again? How to handle one with low mental health during this pandemic? Well, if somebody is disturbed, mentally disturbed, if that is the question, then of course you have to first create a positive environment for the child. Make the place calming, help them understand what is happening. And again, even for people with mental health issues, if you provide them structure helps people, period, right? So it helps them as well. But if she means how do you help somebody who has higher mental disability, it would be the same as the others, except that you have to perhaps break things down more, bring in more clarity, have smaller bits of work to be doing. The structure for the day also has to be keeping in mind that child's ability levels. So for me, that seems to be the answer.
Thank you, ma'am. From Miss Shubhra Mukherjee, the next question on your behalf, who would be answering? Miss, okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
Shubhrati and me both are here. Yeah. I'm Anju.
Yeah, so Archana Arora, postgraduate student of TISS Mumbai, wants to know what are the various ways to reduce the mental health issues faced by PWDs?
As we discussed during our presentation also, that first of all, we need to connect. We need to connect with our parents and children. If children can understand to some extent, definitely with children, we need to talk to them. We need to talk to the parent and to understand what stress or what problem are they going through. And secondly, like once we understand the concern, according to the concern of the children or according to the concern of the parents, we can jot down the, we can discuss the program, we can discuss the further action, like in collaboration with the parents. So like we said, we talked about mindfulness, yoga, we also talked about counseling, we also talked about listening and making them express, making them happy, So giving them, that kind of happiness around affection. So keeping all this in mind, we can, as per the need, we can make the program, or we can talk to them about the action plan.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Javed Ahmed Tak, Dikshit Jagaria, Assistant Teacher, Sayan Primary School wants to know, during this COVID-19 times, PWDs have no job or work, which is affecting their mental health. What can be done? Can I repeat?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, I was muted. Actually, this is a very good question and needs to be a holistic answer. But I can suggest that during pandemics or during the emergency situations, we don't have the proper working system from the home. The government should have a social security policy for the person with disabilities, that there should be a sound amount given to the person with disabilities to support during this emergency situations. And those who are already working, their jobs should not be lost, because we have been given an exemption from the working duties, that we can not go outside because of the less immunity or different reasons of risk. So there should be a social security support from the government, special social security, so that one can have a livelihood support. And after that, there should be the security of jobs also. If someone is working, his job should not be disconnected, but he should carry on his job after coming out of these odd situations.
Thank you so much. I continue with one more question to sir. Prakhar of Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai wants to know, mental health is a very broad issue and it has not been acknowledged or talked about much, and it is especially worse in the case of PWDs. I want to know the functioning of intersectionality in PWDs and how it affects their mental trauma, especially at this time.
I think audio has gone. I think audio has gone. Maika, can we go to Mrs. Manchanda now? Because we need to have our picture also.
Sure.
So let's, Mrs. Manchanda, can we just have a short?
Yes, very short.
Because then we can have the pictures of all the people.
Okay.
And the technical after that.
Thank you, Asha. You all have just now heard the valuable views of our panelists, offering sustainable solutions for people with disabilities. And I really feel proud to say that all of them are former NSA awardees. Before I say little bit about the NSA, I like to take this opportunity, this platform, to acknowledge Dr. Sarla Gopalan, former President IWFA, who has been my mentor. Rather, she has been the mentor to all the people working in IWFA, and she has really shown us the way how to select the awardee organization and how to organize the event of award every year on 2nd August. Now, I will tell you a little bit about this award. IWFA Nina Sibal Memorial Award was administered by IWFA, has been administered by IWFA since 2003. Through this award, IWFA encourages organizations which are managing and educating disabled and disadvantaged children through innovative methods. The award endowment has been made by Shri Kapil Sibal, Senior Advocate and MP Rajya Sabha, in memory of his late wife. The award carries ₹8 lakhs, a trophy, and a citation. I'd like to share with you a bit about Shrimati Neena Sibal, who was an IFS and was very sensitive, merciful, and compassionate towards the lesser privileged. During her stint at the United Nations, she always fought for the rights of those in the less developed world, the needy, and the challenged. She always wanted to do something for them. In the month of April every year, IWAFA sends out over 600 application forms to various organizations all over India and also advertises extensively on the social media. Once the filled-in application forms are received, their details are scrutinized as per some 10-12 criteria laid down by the IWAFA jury committee. And in consultation with Dr. Karan Singh and Mr. Kapil Sibal, the name of the awardee organization is finalized. Dr. Karan Singh, MP Rajya Sabha, and he is also the chairman of the Neena Sibal Award Committee. The most important criteria considered is need for funds because the award is given to the organization which really needs the funds to accomplish their work and not those which are already well funded. The connect between IWAFA and the awardee organizations does not stop at the award ceremony, but we remain in touch as how the award money is being utilized and if we need any collaborations in projects for community welfare. Now, we are looking forward to this year's award ceremony on 2nd August 2020, and I cordially invite all of you to join me and participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadlaji. Thank you so much. We'll just have this slide for all the tech help, all the people who have helped us. And may I request all our people to please switch on your videos so we can see who all are there. We would like to take a group picture. Please all switch on your videos. All please switch on your videos. All the people, participants, please switch on your videos. All participants, please switch on your videos. We would like to see you all. Please switch on your videos. We would like to see you all. And do watch the Neena Sibal Award on 2nd of August. Until then, save the date, stay safe, stay well, and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This is Amit Nirvani from Telangana Human Rights Protection and Development Forum. Thank you so much.
Jimny, হয়ে গেছে এটা বাস